Turangi is a sleepy holiday town and known as the trout fishing capital of the world, but it does have its threats. Dense, inhospitable bush, a swiftly flowing river, and there are several prisons on the outskirts of town. On Christmas Eve 2003, 58-year-old June Sowerby was holidaying in Turangi, as she had every Christmas for many years. But while walking the 600 metres home to the timeshare unit where she was staying, she mysteriously disappeared.
I just could not understand how a person could go missing and nothing be found.
People just don't disappear off the face of the earth for no reason.
Did she fall into the river and drown? Or was she killed in a hit and run?
I think there may be people there that know something about it.
Did she tragically take her own life? Or was she the victim of foul play?
Very, very trusting person. Too trusting, really, I felt.
I think, where is she? Where is she?
We all want to believe that however she's disappeared hasn't been horrific for her. That's for sure.
I have a void in my life that I don't believe will get smaller as the years pass.
It's been 7 years since her disappearance on that fateful Christmas Eve. So what happened to June Sowerby?
Radio New Zealand News at 8 o'clock. Good morning, I'm Stuart Keith. Police at Turangi are resuming the search for a Palmerston North woman missing since Christmas Eve. A shoulder-to-shoulder search begins in an hour.
I happen to be a news junkie. I like listening to the radio news, and it came across that a woman was missing near Turangi, and a thought went through my mind, I hope that is not June Sowerby.
The first I heard about Auntie June's disappearance was I had a message on my cell phone, and it was Auntie Colleen. And her message on my cell phone was that I just wanted to let you know that Auntie June has gone missing under suspicious circumstances. I don't want you to worry, but it's going to be on the news at 6 o'clock tonight on TV1. That was Christmas night.
Good evening. Police are baffled by the disappearance of a woman in the central North Island. June Sowerby from Palmerston North disappeared in Turangi 5 days ago while on a short walk, and nothing's been heard of her since. The 58-year-old...
I was absolutely distraught. I couldn't believe it. You hear about those things happening to other families, you don't expect it to happen to you. It was just really distressing.
Her family's desperate to find out what's happened to her.
Over the first 24 hours of the inquiry, there were some fairly long hours getting done, but my initial thoughts were that we were looking for a body, whether it was somebody that had taken their own life or whether something more sinister had happened. And that was, unfortunately, that was the sort of the track I was going down.
That was the most distressing part, I think, to think that maybe somebody could have hurt her because she wouldn't have deserved anything like that. She was too loving and too kind.
We wanted to nail down exactly where she was when she was last seen, where she'd been prior, what was going on in her life and within the 24-hour period of building up to her last sighting.
June was staying at a timeshare in Turangi, but on Christmas Eve, she'd gone around to visit her cousins who lived nearby.
It was a very nice sunny evening. It was only 7:45 and it was daylight saving, so it was still quite light. She was very happy. She was telling us about her plans, how she was going to see the rest of the family, catch up with all her great nieces and nephews. It was a really happy occasion.
June was planning to walk the Tongariro crossing the next day. She'd asked her cousins if she could borrow an alarm clock to wake her in time for the shuttle bus that would pick her up in the morning.
Borrowing the alarm clock was an unusual request because she was such an organised person. She spent some time telling me about how she'd put her food together, but she hadn't thought of a clock, which was unusual.
Elaine and her husband Dennis lived just around the corner from June's timeshare. With an early start the next day, June wasn't staying for dinner, and at around 8 p.m, she said her farewells.
She didn't actually say she was going back to the timeshare, but she said she might go for a little wander, a little walk. We were all sitting at the table, and Dennis was facing the road, and he saw her walk along the footpath and turn right along the street to head back towards the motel or the timeshare that she was staying in.
Just a few minutes after June had left, they noticed the alarm clock still sitting on the couch. So Elaine's mother tried to catch up with June to give it to her.
When Mum walked down the road to the bend, I would have expected her to have been able to see her. I walk that way every day to my school, and I can see quite a distance along that road.
Within the space of just a few minutes, June had disappeared, never to be seen again.
In the normal course of events, I would have expected her back, well, sometime there that evening, because she was planning to depart for this Tongariro crossing. I checked her bedroom at least a couple of times during the night. She definitely did not return to the timeshare after she left it that afternoon to visit her relatives.
Turangi was special to June, a place she'd often visited with friend Alf Gollan.
Alf was a friend that she met in the Taurua Tramping Club in Wellington, and she got to know him quite well and went round to his house and started doing housework and doing baking for him and things like this, and he really enjoyed her company, and so it was formed like a father-daughter relationship.
It was completely unofficial, but he did come to regard her as his adopted daughter, and she reciprocated.
But June would spend the beginning of her holiday in 2003 alone. Alf had died 2 years earlier, but as John still owned the timeshare, she continued going to Turangi anyway.
June was basically Alf's friend, not my friend. I mean, I just acquired her by default.
But as Christmas Day dawned, John was the man on the spot. And with still no sign of June, John became increasingly concerned.
It wasn't actually till the afternoon of Christmas Day that I decided that I had to make a phone call or two.
His first call was to the timeshare manager.
Of course, I says, "Oh, come on, John, you know what she's like. She's probably, had a wine or two with cousins or friends, and she's bedded down for the night."
But as the day wore on, it became clear that June had disappeared without a trace.
I think John, he really started to get concerned, probably because he knew June more than me, and came back over, and then I suggested he ring the police.
It certainly wasn't long before the police were visiting the timeshare.
Myself and 5 detectives from Napier set up camp in Turangi the next day, and we started pulling together what was a major inquiry for the area.
We realised at that stage, yes, that this was a serious situation.
The teams were really split into 2 different types. We had investigators, and we had the search teams. We had the Turangi, Taupo and Rotorua search and rescue teams.
Even amongst all of us as individuals, opinion was divided as to what had happened. Several were going down the track that she'd taken her own life. Some were going down the fact that she's just innocently disappeared. Others were going down the track that something sinister had occurred to her.
There were various scenarios running through everybody's head. We didn't really want to think the worst. We wanted to think that it hadn't been an unpleasant situation that she'd got into.
June Sowerby went missing on Christmas Eve 2003 while walking home to her holiday accommodation in Turangi. On the face of it, her disappearance made no sense. She'd been looking forward to her holiday and appeared in good spirits. But something happened that evening and she never made it back to her timeshare unit. Does the answer lie in her past? June Sowerby was the fifth of 6 children and had always been the chatterbox in the family.
I guess people would say that my sister June was gregarious, which sounds quite a hard word, I think. But June was friendly. She loved talking, and she'd talk to a cat on the side of the road. She'd talk to anyone that would listen to her. June was interested in people, but she also had a great love of nature and she loved the outdoors. She loved tramping.
An active member of the Forest and Bird Society. Of all the places she tramped, there was one that held a special place in June's heart.
Tioni is a 100-year-old homestead and it's in the middle of a clearing in this beautiful native bush. She was a happy camper. Camp mother when she was inside, Sergeant Major when she was outside. I'd have to say it was very hard to look for birds when June was with your group because she would be creating so much noise that the birds would fly off. and to get June to be quiet was sort of mission impossible. She loved being camp mother. She loved being the centre of attention. She was the life of the party, really.
With such an outgoing personality, it was no surprise when reports came in of a possible sighting of June talking to people in a car park beside the Tongariro River.
A motorist driving past had seen a woman generally fitting June's description at 8:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve in the northern end of the bridge. In the absence of anything that says that they're not credible, you grab it and run with it. It suggested that she crossed the bridge. At the end of the day, we couldn't be certain.
The walk home to June's timeshare accommodation is about 600 metres. The car park where she may have been seen is to the north and some way off the direct route home. If it was June the witnesses saw, she wasn't heading directly home to her timeshare. But in the end, these possible sightings came to nothing, and the police inquiry ground to a halt.
One of the difficulties with searches is to decide how long a search goes on for. On the 4th day, the police reviewed the whole situation.
You haven't done this one down here.
We'd covered the main areas, we'd covered further afield, all the main tracks. And so we felt by that 4th day that there was nothing further that we could possibly do that would give us any new clues or any clues at all.
Or is it in front of us or behind us?
It was very, very frustrating, to work on an inquiry so intensely like that for 2 to 3 weeks, and at the end of the day have no result whatsoever.
I just could not understand how a person could go missing and nothing be found.
You see all these programs on television and there's clues everywhere. Not in the real world, there's not.
One scenario that was considered was June having had an accident.
It's possible she could have slipped into the river. She was a real nature person, and she's the sort of person, if she was walking along the riverbank and saw something like a different sort of plant or a bird or something, she'd investigate. But she was also very careful.
The Tongariro River is part of a large hydroelectricity scheme, and its levels and flows are carefully monitored. On the evening June went missing, there have been suggestions the river may have been in flood, raising the possibility that June fell into the river, was swept away and drowned.
So the river peaked at 5 o'clock at about 56 cumecs. By about 8 p.m. it was back down to 35 cumecs, and then it slowly receded over the following day.
So at around 8:30 when June went missing, the river was actually below the average flow for that time of year, and certainly not in flood.
Christmas Eve 2003 I would consider very minor. Although the river did rise, I wouldn't consider it significant for this particular river.
It seems the river level is of little relevance.
I still struggle to believe that she would have drowned because there wasn't like a slip mark and you'd think something would have got caught somewhere. But there's just, I believe, nothing.
The chances of finding June's body in Lake Taupo or the Tongariro River are surprisingly high. According to Water Safety New Zealand figures since accurate records began in 1980, of the 37 people who have drowned in the lake or river, all but 2 bodies were recovered.
Yes, if she fell into the water, which I can't see happening, she would just swim to the side, or she'd certainly make a noise. She's a very noisy person.
If June didn't drown in the river, the strongest remaining possibilities are suicide or murder. June Sowerby mysteriously disappeared on Christmas Eve 2003 while holidaying in Turangi. At the time, the inevitable question was raised: did she take her own life?
Yeah, I do know where her depression came from and what triggered it off in her younger years. So she had definitely talked about that side of her life openly with me.
One of June's most difficult times was when she was living in Wellington in the 1980s.
She had many jobs, but the jobs that most stick in my mind is when she worked for the government and she ordered supplies for the government. Now that was a big responsibility, but it also became a very emotional time for my sister.
June uncovered a scam. Employees were stealing supplies from various government departments, but in a male-dominated world, blowing the whistle didn't win her any friends.
I think it changed June's life. And from there on, June just seemed to not be the same person, and work was never the same for her. And in actual fact, it wasn't long after that June got on her bicycle and went for a trip round the South Island just cycling. The trip was great for her, but I don't think that it healed her completely. I think she suffered for many, many years.
June was medicated for her depression and lived a modest life on a sickness benefit.
I don't feel June would have taken her own life because she was looking forward to going to the Tongariro crossing and doing a tramp, and she had already got her $25 and her ticket to go on the bus in the morning, so someone that was thinking of taking their own life wouldn't have done that.
Another interesting clue was a phone call June made just before she vanished.
There was a time just before she disappeared that my husband and I were struggling a little bit, and she had a little bit of money in her bank account, and so she offered to loan that to us.
But just a few days before she went missing, June spoke to Linda again and asked her if she could pay the money back.
She wanted the money so that she knew she would have enough money to continue the rest of her holiday, for bus fares, eating, probably buying the kids little treats, things like that, so she knew she wouldn't run out of money.
It seems unlikely that someone intent on committing suicide would call in a debt.
I can immediately dismiss that my sister June did not take her life. Okay, let's get that straight. She did not take her life. My son took his life, and June thought it was the most disgusting, despicable thing that anyone could do to their loved ones. And she said she did not know how another person could do that. No, June did not take her life. I'm sure of that.
But in the weeks before heading to Turangi, June made a worrying confession.
Hello, Sue.
June had told my wife, Sue, that either she was going off completely her medication for depression or that she was reducing her medication, and at the end of the day, not quite sure which.
Yeah, she was moving on. She wasn't going to rely on medication anymore. That was how she was feeling.
But the repercussions of June's decision may have been serious, and they were about to be compounded further. June may not have been able to do the Tongariro crossing, something she'd really been looking forward to.
From memory, she came in on the 23rd and talked to the people at the backpackers about going on the crossing. She came in on the 24th as well, the day that she went missing, just to check the weather. But the weather was looking quite iffy on that day, so we weren't sure whether we were going or not.
As predicted, the weather on Christmas Day was bad, and June's fears would have been confirmed.
The weather was really nasty on Christmas Day in 2003. We had a few people turn up in the morning, but the weather just wasn't conducive to do the crossing. So when June didn't turn up in the morning at 7:30, it wasn't unusual. We cancelled the trip anyway, and the day before we were talking about cancelling it due to the weather.
To get some clarity on June's possible suicide, we asked leading Australian criminologist Wayne Petherick to review the case.
One of the first things that struck me when I examined the Sowerby case was really how little evidence there was. So in this particular instance, it's going to be pivotal to really understand who she was as a person.
And when considering suicide, of particular interest are any future plans June may have made.
People who are suicidal or who are genuinely intent on taking their own lives, they often don't plan for the future. The other thing we have to factor in with suicide is, generally speaking, when there's a suicide, there's a body, and we don't have a body. Weighing all those factors, I would have to suggest that the possibility of June Sowerby taking her own life is very slim indeed.
Suicide to me is never ever on the cards, and there would have to be some pretty amazing proof discovered for me to ever believe that that was an option.
As the days passed, with no new leads, June's family could do little more than honour her memory.
The service was held at the Baptist Church in Palmerston North, which was June's spiritual home.
She was just hilarious.
It was just absolutely mind-boggling to see how many more people's lives she touched.
June would have just loved it. It would have just been her to a T. She would have loved it.
On the way back up to Auckland, we stopped at the car park in Turangi. In some ways it was very calming, but it was also a little bit eerie as well, because I just associate Turangi as being not the centre of evil, but it's where Auntie June went missing from.
June Sowerby vanished on Christmas Eve 2003 while holidaying in the small central North Island town of Turangi. A few days before she disappeared, June took the manager of the timeshare aside for a chat. Although June would be spending the first few days of her holiday alone, John Gollan, the owner of the timeshare, was due to arrive in a few days, and he was bringing his friend Bev.
she insinuated that she wished John was coming on his own.
I had a conversation with June a couple of weeks before she went up, and she was quite apprehensive about going, and should I go, shouldn't I go? And, you know, I don't really want to go because I don't like them, but I'm going to go. It's my right to be there and I want to be there.
Bev and June, for some reason, did not get on terribly well with each other. It had nothing to do with me, really. That was all in connection with Alf. June did not want me to bring Bev up there. But you see, I was the owner of the timeshare, and the owner has the right to choose who the guests are.
Just 2 days before June's disappearance, there were reports of a disturbance.
The security guard, he had actually heard arguing. He knew all the units and he was confident that it was coming from Chalet 25.
The very chalet June was staying in.
He can't recall the actual words. It was just loud.
There was a slight argument because the timeshare kitchen is a little bit pokey, and June wanted another 10 minutes or something to work in the kitchen on her meal preparation or something, and Bev was unwilling to allow her that, you know. And then Bev turns up the volume on the TV set a bit too high, I guess, and June, I think, threatened to smash the TV or something. But Bev makes some disparaging remark about her, and June hears it, you see, and comes storming back, and Bev's just standing there, not saying a word, and June sort of towering over her, sort of staring down at her, and I was just sitting there looking at them both. So yeah, there was unfortunately a certain amount of minor conflict there.
There had been some disagreements, and I think it was no more than the issue of overcrowding in the unit, that 2's company, 3's a crowd.
It was a mistake on my part in having them both there at the same time. That was a mistake.
There were also conflicting reports that June was no longer welcome at the timeshare.
It was made clear to June, following some disagreements, that she wasn't welcome to use the lodge anymore.
Oh, June would have been very angry at being told that. He wanted her out of his life totally complete, and that she'd given him enough hassles over the years with being there, you know, at Christmas, and he hadn't liked her there, and she was so insistent to be there that I feel that he just wanted her out of his life, and he had to think of a way of doing that.
I think at the time, John was feeling he definitely was a suspect.
And new information has also come to light. Before he died, John's father, Alf, told June she might inherit a share of his house in the Wellington suburb of Northland.
And June had that idea in her head that she was going to get half of the Northland property sort of given to her on a plate when Alf died. But you see, when Alf was still alive, he made me the joint owner of that property with him.
Legally, when a joint owner dies, the other inherits their share. So when Alf died in 2001, John became the outright owner of the property, and June received nothing. She was
highly disappointed with me because she didn't get it. So the Northland property was really what it was all about. She wanted half of that.
Although her domestic situation was complicated, police concluded it had nothing to do with her disappearance. However, the circumstances surrounding June's last stay in Turangi have certainly left their mark.
Well, to tell you the truth, I think about it every day because Chalet 25 is still there and I walk past it every morning. So June would have been in the single room here on her own, and then across the hallway here, John would have had his own room. When I come back into this unit, yeah, I think of June. I'm feeling a wee bit uptight even now. Yep, wee bit uptight. Just thinking about it. I think, where is she? Where is she?
June's disappearance has remained a mystery, but with suicide and accidental death now less likely, murder is a theory that can't be ruled out. And the answer could lie in the town itself. Turangi has an interesting history, including its almost total rebuilding in the mid-1960s.
Turangi was a pretty tough little town. You know, there's fairly high unemployment in the town. With high unemployment, it just all lends itself to dishonesty type offences. You know, there was a lot of cars getting broken into in the car parks, a lot of burglary. There's a lot of cannabis growing, a lot of cannabis dealing.
Adding to these problems are the two major prisons in the area, Hautu and Rangipo.
Having the prisons nearby, there tends to be a lot of families will move to Turangi to be closer to their family that might be incarcerated.
Could this criminal element have been a factor in June's disappearance?
June would make conversation with anybody she met. She was a very, very friendly person, very, very trusting person. Too trusting, really, I felt.
She may have stumbled across a car getting broken into, a drug deal happening, someone getting assaulted. We were told that she can be confrontational. So she may have seen or heard something, intervened and paid the price for it.
At the time of June's disappearance, several persistent rumours emerged.
There were rumours going around that we were hearing in the inquiry team about people that could possibly be involved. In any inquiry like that, there is going to be a list of suspects or suspicious people that the police need to go and pay a little bit of attention to.
One rumour concerned a local man, known to police, who returned home late on Christmas Eve with wet clothing. A relative who found the clothing also noticed scratches on the man's face. When questioned by police, the man admitted having been in a fight, but was inconsistent about who he'd been fighting with. He also denied that his trousers were wet. Police say the man was eliminated from the inquiry, but declined to say how. But perhaps the most disturbing information came from two witnesses who drove through Turangi on Christmas Eve.
Well, we stopped for some dinner at Burger King and then pulled in down the road at a rest area. We had got out of the car and were having a smoke and our dinner, and then we were approached by some guys from across the park asking for a ride.
You could see that they were, hanging around, maybe looking like they were going to cause a bit of trouble or something.
They didn't really seem to mind where they were going, they just wanted to go. They didn't say, can you give us a ride to Taupo, or can you give us a ride just up the road? They just asked for a ride in general. I noticed that one of them had blood on his hands and there was a bit of blood running down his fingers. When I saw the blood, I thought the best thing to do was to get in the car and get out of there and not have much more to do with them.
When we found out there was a lady missing in the area, it did seem a lot more significant, like we needed to tell somebody because maybe they'd had something to do with it.
Yeah, it is quite hard to make an innocent explanation for it. It's not your everyday activity for most people to have bleeding knuckles or anything like that, and no particular destination either.
These witnesses both provided statements to police, but further inquiries came to nothing. But despite this, murder still seems the most likely scenario.
I do believe that somebody out there does have some information as to what would have happened to June. People just don't disappear off the face of the earth for no reason, and I do believe that if June had taken her own life or something innocent had happened to her, I do believe we would have found her.
We did a lot of immediate
Criminology, or the science of crime, has advanced significantly since June went missing. So we've asked Ross Gordon from the Search and Rescue Institute of New Zealand to review the case and apply more recent abduction theories to it.
Whenever there's anything unexplained or suspicious, we should automatically think crime. There's some British research which indicates to us, if in doubt, think murder. And there's enough doubt with what's going on here to create that.
A rumour to support this theory came to light in 2004.
9th of February, I was involved in an interview of a guy who frequented Turangi and Tokoroa and other towns in that area, and he offered up some information regarding June's disappearance and said that he was having dreams about it and thinks about it every time he drives over the bridge, and thinks he knows where the body is, but doesn't want to take the police there because he thinks the police are going to blame him for it. This guy doesn't perhaps think like you and I, and it could have just been the ramblings of a guy that was under stress and not being of sound mind normally. So yeah, it could well have been, but then again, I believe it's still something that would warrant some investigation as well.
For legal reasons, we can't name this person, but he's since served time for sex and violence offences and has also told a prison officer he has information regarding June Sowerby.
He was a person of interest during the inquiry. He was spoken to. I can't answer how he was eliminated.
Armed with this new information, and to increase their chances of finding some trace of June, Ross Gordon has employed the latest computer mapping and modelling software.
This detail here actually shows the last known point. The town itself is situated here.
The Eagle Technology mapping systems allows us to take a huge area of 300 million square metres and reduce it down to some hotspots. Then those hotspots we can prioritise and control and search. For instance, the research starts to tell us that on the roads heading west towards Taramanui, south towards Wairau and north towards Taupo, there are certain places along there that they dump bodies, such as rest areas, besides bridges, off where it slopes down. And by using the new mapping system, what we're able to do is get the mapping system to go through and identify those particular areas.
Yeah. There's certainly a lot of places that you're now talking about that weren't searched, particularly dump sites.
So if we put the search teams out in those high probability areas, we're in with a chance.
Yeah.
If tomorrow we could find something that relates to June, that would be absolutely brilliant. In search, we have to be optimistic. Someone wins lotto each week. So we have to be optimistic. That's why we go out there. June Sowerby went missing.
Ross Gordon has assembled a team of experienced search and rescue volunteers for an intensive 2-day search for missing 58-year-old June Sowerby. Almost 7 years have passed since she went missing, but with extensive planning, they're hoping for a result.
We've got approximately 50 spots which have been identified as worthy of search, and we'll just work our way systematically through them.
One of the teams is searching a known dumping ground, and it's not long before they've found something of interest.
There's all sorts of rubbish here, including a dead horse, fridges, other piles of bones, and if it's good enough to get rid of rubbish, then it's also a good place for bodies.
Bones over here, right?
Juvenile animal.
Looks like an animal.
It looks like animal bones to me,
The bones aren't human, but something else immediately catches Ross's attention.
Okay, the whole area is flat, so we've got a raised bit, and classic. Look, there we got some material. You certainly. But once again, it's the change in the baseline environment which gives it away, is that rise. The ground here is flat, so anything that's a rise is different. Here's a bone here. More bones here. Now, if we followed every piece of bone that's around here, we have forensics tied up for years on end.
Again, the bones aren't human.
Have you had any feedback from Team 1, over?
But another team has found a piece of leather. Based on the sandals June was wearing when she went missing, Ross heads back to base to take a look.
The suggestion is, looking at it, it's actually the top upper part of the foot.
The reality is that around the waterways around New Zealand, there's shoes floating everywhere and rubbish and so forth. So what would be just a straightforward case of re-establishing the footwear that she was wearing, seeing whether this fits, and then it can either be put aside as not relevant, or if it is relevant, then we could re-establish planning on that. Although how it got there, floating by water, could have come from anywhere.
The teams are searching a huge area, but they found something particularly unusual. A hole that's clearly been backfilled with dirt.
Let's just have a look at that before we go much further. This bit of wood. You've got the hard edges where it hasn't been dug, and then the soft where it has been. So we've just got a small hole, which is probably not practical for a whole body. You can feel that side of the pit, that's quite firm. It is, isn't it? Yeah, this stuff's all soft. My gut reaction is that they wanted to bury something deep, they've gone to the trouble, and they haven't been able to get it deep enough. Therefore, they've gone and dug somewhere else.
The hole is a significant find, and the GPS location of it has been passed on to police.
Okay, folks, we've come to the end of the search. June went missing 7 years ago. You know, she's someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's neighbour, someone's friend. And unfortunately, we weren't able to help her on this occasion. And wherever she is, I hope she can look back and think, well, there's some good people out there doing their thing for me. So hopefully she feels satisfied as well. There's only one word for it. Thanks.
To this day, this case remains open, waiting for a clue that may unlock the mystery. Since her disappearance, a small memorial has been placed on the wall at the Tioni homestead. Although gone, June is not forgotten.
We will always remember June's laughter because it seemed to be her laughter was above everybody else's laughter. She was really at home in the bush and the outdoors, and what better place to have a memory to June than at Tioni.
If somebody is sitting on something, think of the family. June has not been found. The family need closure. If you haven't already come to the police with that information, then please do so.
We often stop and let balloons go. We take yellow balloons with us. For me personally, I find it quite comforting to go to that area, go to where she last was.
I have a void in my life that I don't believe will get smaller. The memories of some of the good times will probably fade, and I suppose some of them already are, but she's always with me.